The Datavana podcast, hosted by Lon Wax, features visionaries, leaders, and really smart people who join our hosts to converse about marketing, sales, operations, and everything that data ties together. We focus on practical examples, stories, and horror stories, centering around what data nirvana looks like and what the path is to achieve it.
All right, welcome to the Datavana show, where we talk about everything that can be done by data, from winning elections to everything else that can go in the world. Data drives everything, as we know. But this time, we're not going to go into politics. We're going to go into things which enable us to think about go-to-market. And we have an incredible guest with us, Mr. Matt Heinz. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
It's sunny in New York City. That doesn't happen often in November, but hey, we'll take it, right? It is what it is.
That's right.
So, Matt, I can talk to you for like 20 minutes about your career and your progression, what you do and all that. But people know you, can Google you, and we'll add that to the session as well. But I want to ask you the reverse of that. Who would you be if you were not the famous Matt Heinz, go-to-market guru extraordinaire? What would your life take you to?
I'd be the head writer for Saturday Night Live.
If they'll take you.
That's true. Well, you asked me like a sort of this fantasy question, and for growing up, it was I want to play first base for the Chicago Cubs. I mean, it was just an easy answer, great. And I would still do that. But I think I definitely do not have the skill set to be the head writer of Saturday Night Live, and I'm sure that it is just a crazy job. But that would be fun.
I think that'd be amazing.
Yeah,
you are a funny guy. I mean, you have some good wit about you and good dry wit as well, which I respect a lot. Me as like a well-known geek can understand these things, and I try to be funny myself. Even my 6-year-old makes fun of me and tells me to stop making jokes. That's my life today, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah, I do. I am pretty good at the occasional dad joke. It's funny. I made a couple on a team meeting the other day, and Nick, my middle son, was down here playing, and he came up and he just whispered and he said, "I know you're on a call, but you really shouldn't tell. That's a really bad joke. You shouldn't tell other people that joke."
I love it. What's
I told
funny?
it because it is bad, but it was pretty funny.
The funny thing is, we enjoy them so much, and we know they're good. Our kids are sick of them. And all of these millennials, the 20s and the early 30s, they still don't have kids. They're like, they don't get it. They don't know if to laugh, to be like courteous, or they just don't get it.
Yeah, but I'm getting old enough now. I don't care anymore.
Exactly.
If you don't get it, it's fine. I'm
as long as we have fun.
Right.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about, this thing called data and the state of Nirvana. We'll talk a lot about that, not the band, but actually about data specifically.
Sure.
So we start with one interesting tidbit, which we ask. So if you had the magic wand here, let me give you a wand, whatever you want, make like magic powder, and you could go to all of the hundreds of amazing B2B CMOs and other leaders you talk to, and you could eradicate one thing that is always distracting us and annoying us and really making our lives harder. What would it be? What would you take out of this world? Whether it's a 3-letter acronym or something else. What do you think is bad?
It'd be you mentioned acronyms. I might try to eliminate MQL from our vocabulary.
Love it.
I might decide that if you think about an MQL for most companies is someone that filled out a form. And forms are two things. One, they are arbitrary. They are not a consistent indicator of someone's interest. And two, a form is purely a function of what the seller needs. Like you literally are putting a barrier between your prospect and something they want from you. So the people you want to sell to, you are intentionally keeping them away from what you want them to have because you want them to fill out a form first. And yes, you want to know who they are so you can follow up, and your 21-year-old SDRs can call them 6 times a day. I get it, but that is what you want, not what the customer wants. And so if you could say, hey, listen, just like we had to eliminate field events, in Q2 of this year, if I said you can no longer generate leads through forms, like what would you do differently? I think you would see far more customer and prospect friendly marketing programs.
I love it. Okay. So let's dive on that one, because that is a contagious, provocative kind of take, like eliminate forms because it's a selfish view. I'm going to summarize it. And of course, I'm taking it to an extreme because this time I'm the host. I'm allowed to, right? So what does it mean? Like, let's say that you are now technology and the standard of customer experience first means no forms. Do you think marketers, B2B marketers will really take a hit, or will they just have to pivot?
You have to pivot. I mean, it doesn't mean you do anything necessarily different. If you have good content, you still share that. If you have good engagement offers, you still offer that. But you're reducing a barrier in between you and your customers when you do that. You're making it easier for prospects to get what they need more directly. And because our data in many cases is better, we can observe what your prospect is doing. We can observe where they're spending their time and provide the most appropriate next step. Whether that's, maybe it is a sales call, maybe it's a consultation, maybe it's another piece of content that fits into the stream of content and research that they're doing on their own. And so I think, if you have good data, if you have data that sits across multiple platforms, then you can make better decisions on what you do with your customer next that is in their favor. So instead of putting barriers between you and your customers, you're actually making it so that they can lean in more, so that they can accelerate the velocity of their journey with you.
Love it. So basically what you're saying is, if you look at it holistically, is making the customer journey, great, about the customer, not about you. You need to align the foundation, orchestrate the data between it. And there's no reason to put these hurdles in the way of a prospect, a client, a temporary person, whoever it is, no matter what score they are. You can enable them to self-select and say, yes, I want to talk to you. Yeah. But for that, you might need some stuff. Or like, what gets in the way of people actually doing that? Is that the fear of data alignment? What is it?
Well, it's a couple things. One, if you don't have a replacement strategy, then it might leave you in a lurch, right? If you don't know how to look at your data and understand customer journeys across systems and have a next step for how to manage that. If you don't have that in place, then if you get rid of leads, maybe you don't, or get rid of those form fills, then maybe you don't have something. Also, I think that, we have taught boards, we have taught CEOs, we've taught leadership teams to really value this lead definition we've been using forever. And they've become enamored with this up and to the right chart that shows them that leads is where it's at. And so I think that there's a culture change that has to happen between what sales is used to getting and what leadership and boards are used to seeing. That it is not going to be an overnight change, but I'm seeing more and more companies over the last year and a half, like rip out their forms, right? Like literally like rip out those barriers, eliminate the MQL from the conversation. And, there's some rough waters when you first do that. But it's a path to far better alignment between sales and marketing and far better journeys and conversations with the prospects that you want to engage.
I love it. I think it's if you look at the strategy and you start with that, saying we want sales and marketing and eventually customer success, 80% or 100% focus on these target ICPs and slice it into one to many, one to few, and so forth. One tactic is, okay, who cares about leads anymore? It's about engaged accounts, right? And then to do that, then secondary is we can eliminate all of these hurdles and we just want to aggregate the data. So that's changing the tactics. I love it. I think it's great. I have eliminated the terminology of leads from any company I work with. I want salespeople to focus only on accounts. Why bother with leads? Look at something that's more important to you. And so I agree with you completely. So what does it mean actually for you when we talk about this data behind it, all of this? I know there's reporting, analytics, and there's data and systems. If you could have, again, this magic wand or whatever you want to call it and say, this is for me, I believe that data Nirvana, the utopic state of data, would mean what? What would it enable?
A single view, a single accurate real-time view of what's going on. And I guess those are three things. Single view means I've at least have commonality across all my systems, that my CRM system and my marketing system and my customer success system and my ERP all see the same thing. That's one. Accurate means like it's up to date. Most of us have CRM systems. If you've been around in business for a while, you've got your customer in there 4 different times based on the last 4 jobs that they had, right? And so we're not always good about updating that and making that clean. And so then all of a sudden you got spam issues, you've got inefficiency issues all across the board. And then having that be updated in real time, right? To know that when changes happen to your customers, when changes happen to them, to their company, when certain intent signals happen, when certain trigger events happen you want to follow up with, you want to be able to know and react to that pretty quickly. So those are the 3 elements that I think are most important and unfortunately most often missing from what most sales and marketing teams are doing in managing their data.
And why is that? Do you think is it because they look at it differently? They look at data differently?
It's hard. No, it's hard. It's just hard. It requires more work, right? I mean, this is not, you have to invest some time and effort and usually bring in some tools that can help you with this. And I think a lot of companies, if they have $1 and they're asked, can you spend this $1 on a marketing campaign or spend this $1 on a tool that can they can clean up your data? The clean up your data is not the sexy answer, but I will tell you that bad data is the silent killer of all those marketing campaigns you're trying to do. If you don't fix the data issue, it's like trying to put out a fire by shooting water at the top of the flames. You don't fix what's on fire. And so you never get the fire out.
Yeah, I love it. The bad data is the problem. If you're looking at payback and you're not able to understand if your payback is right or not, or what is actually working, how are you going to fix that? Great. Do you think attribution is something that's critical and really deep? You need to know it all? Or if you have good enough data, then attribution becomes secondary?
Well, you're never going to know it all. I mean, I think it's for most of us that are running complex buying journeys. I mean, if you're doing a transactional type sale, maybe sort of cause and effect, you can figure that out. But for most of the rest of us in B2B that are selling across multiple members of a buying committee in a buying process that takes a long time and it's across multiple channels, we have to, I mean, this may not be popular, but you have to stop chasing full attribution. I just don't see that we're ever going to have that full picture. Now, can you understand which channels are more effective than others? Yes. Can you understand where marketing may have influenced something based on content you can track? Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you want to sort of create those breadcrumb trails to understand what's going on. But unfortunately, I see a lot of companies that chase the perfect report without improving their execution. I mean, great reports are just going to show shitty campaigns if that's still what you're doing. But great campaigns will perform whether or not you're measuring it or not.
Exactly. So overall, you're going to get better benefit. And a lot of times, unfortunately, I see the attribution discussion happening at not actually the right table. It's not the RevOps and the marketing and the sales working on it together, saying, what did we do that worked well in these 25 things that influenced this deal? But rather it's about, marketing wants more money. But wait, prove to me that you're working. Prove to me that your brand campaign has worked. What are your thoughts around that?
I get that people want clarity and I get that companies want this to be more transparent and more simple, but let's face it, it's messy. Marketing is messy. I just got off a call that you were on. We were talking about customer advocacy with a bunch of CMOs. And, when we asked the question about measurement, you start talking about, well, here's how many advocates we're managing and here's how many likes I got on this. We start going back to tactics again that aren't metrics you can buy a beer with, because that translation is difficult to see. And just because you can't measure it doesn't mean it's not valuable. And I could actually argue, and I heard this, I'm totally blanking on the name of someone who told me this a couple of years ago. And it's true. I mean, the more important the metric, the more difficult it is to measure. Like the easy things you can measure tend to be the least important things, like clicks and likes and retweets and impressions. So there's a level of complexity there that some people either both aren't willing to lean in on, as well as they over prioritizing finding a solution for.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah. I mean, just telling you, hey, here's how many visitors, or a blog got this many people doing things. That's a secondary metric. Why don't we start with the bottom line and how we're doing as a company, and then what's working? Yeah, I understand that. Well, a lot of times we talk about who owns the data, and that's always an interesting scope of it. So what is RevOps to you? What do you think RevOps' role should be to the CMO, the CRO, and even the CFO? And who owns the data or the single view of the data in the company, you think, in B2B?
Well, if you're pursuing a single view of the data, then there isn't inherently sort of a primary owner. Like, it's the company owns the data. And if you're looking at it between sales, marketing, customer success, finance, it's a collective ownership. I mean, so there isn't really, I don't know if this is the communist answer, but I'm not worried about which department owns it. I'm worried about making sure that there's consistency and value in that data across systems. Now, there are plenty of marketing teams that have increasingly taken over ownership of revenue operations, right? And said, listen, we're marketing, we're the voice of the customer. The data is about the customer, and therefore we are going to help manage that. I see the best places for RevOps to live are either within marketing or sometimes within finance, right? To have RevOps report up to the CFO to make sure that data is optimized can be useful. If it's owned in sales, it's just not a function sales should be distracted with. If it's owned in IT, unfortunately, it tends not to follow business rules and tends to be more about the reports and more about the data and less about what the data is doing. So I think revenue ops in marketing, revenue ops in finance tend to be two of the best organizational solutions.
Love it. Have you seen revenue ops becoming this insight engine and giving you recommendations and takeaways already about what the go-to-market machine should be doing? Or is it mainly still tasked like try to tie all the data together, try to build reports? Where is it at in maturity?
Yeah, I love that question. And I think that there's obviously many companies at different levels of that maturity curve. I would say too many companies still treat the data just as facts in and of themselves. Like, here's the data, here's the numbers. And if I can have them in an organized way, and if I can have them in clean reports, and if I can make it so you can access the data right away, then I'm good. But data is meant to be interpreted, right? I mean, if you look at a report or a dashboard, you should answer 3 questions. Like, what does it say? What does it mean? And now what do I do? Right? So in too many reports and too many RevOps systems, it's just about like, here's what it says. Here's what it says. And then you move on. Like, no. Depending on what it says, is that good? Is that bad? What does that imply? What does it mean to us based on what that says? And what are we going to do about it? Sometimes you look at a report, you're like, okay, green light, everything's good. What we do next is just keep doing what we're doing. I want to identify the data and the trends and reports that tell me I should be doing something differently, telling me I should do something new, telling me that I should stop doing something that's not working. And so making that data actionable and creating an environment, no matter where that data sits and no matter who's managing it, that you're actually taking action proactively, that you're doing reviews with next steps proactively, that's where it's at.
Yeah, if I had $1 for every time I got a sync or interlock meeting, where 45 minutes is just spent on understanding the data and agreeing methodology of what this data means, it is, in order to have a proper interlock and agreement between the functions, it's, why don't we first of all define what data we're looking at? What do these KPIs mean to us?
Yep.
And then let's starting to understand what we should be doing next. It's so much time is spent on just deciphering what the data means. Do you see that as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think, and it takes, you have to invest the time to do that. You have to invest, you have to have people that know that that's part of the job. And you also have to invest part of their time to actually do that. And unfortunately, there isn't always a direct output from that effort. Sometimes you look at the data and you don't come up with a good idea. You don't come up with a good insight. So there's a level of fishing that you're doing there, but you have to it's kind of a funny week to say this, but you have to trust the process, right? You have to trust that, the process of looking at the data sometimes is going to be more fruitful than other times. Sometimes you're not going to have as much insight out of it, but I think that's the long-term play of pulling insights out of that data is really what's most important.
Yeah, leading indicators, the nagging indicators, at least you agree on a set of KPIs and align to it. Well, we talked a lot about the data and how you get it and that. Well, there must be some amazing horror stories that you can tell us about getting data, failing at data, misunderstanding data. You don't have to mention names, but I'm sure you've had 1 or 2 of those in your lives. Tell us.
Well, I mean, there's a couple sort of, I guess, challenges people have with data that I guess are reminders to the rest of us. One is, fiefdoms of data where you have, there's the marketing point of view, there's the sales point of view, there's the finance point of view, there's the CEO's point of view, and everyone's using data to tell a different story. And it's a big circle that never goes anywhere. So I think that common view of the data to say, okay, like we're going to agree on what the data says. We can have different interpretations of what it says, but we have to have a single view of the data. That's one. 2 is building some integrity around your data and then stopping. Like people get really excited. Oh, we just updated everything. We just purged Salesforce. We added this new stuff. As soon as you set it, it deteriorates. And I read somewhere, this is a couple of years ago, B2B data deteriorates at like a rate of like 3 to 4% a month. So if it's been a quarter since you updated your data, you're already getting close to 10% deterioration on that. So if you set it and forget it, you're going to be in big trouble sooner than you think.
Yeah, it's a process that needs to be always enhanced by making sure that your data is not just of quality now, but of quality going forward. By the way, since the unfortunate pandemic and COVID, this is actually accelerated even more because people are now working remotely using different systems. People have moved and unfortunately lost a lot of jobs. So it's called the data decay. Data decay, unfortunately, now is much bigger, especially if you're trying to do things that are trying to copy the in-person world to the virtual world, direct mail and other things. It is hard. You got to update the data.
And when I'm talking, the data I'm thinking about is just, like, where do you work? What's your title? Like, do you change jobs? Do you change roles? But then there's the data you have around what someone's interested in right now. If someone spent, 2 hours yesterday watching videos about account-based marketing on your website yesterday, they're doing that right now. They're doing that research right now. Like, they're not, and if you say you follow up in a couple months and say, oh yeah, you're still doing that research. No, probably not. They probably moved on to something else, or they've made a decision on what to do next about it. So when you were talking about intent signals and insights, the shelf life is significantly shorter. And so if you're not capturing it, if you're not taking advantage of it, if you're not taking action on it, you're missing out big time.
Yeah. Are people now already looking at intent fully integrated into their data in an automatic and orchestrated manner? Is that something you see a lot today?
Increasingly, yes. I still, unfortunately, we still see a lot of companies that are campaign heavy and data light, that are sort of output heavy and operations light. It's not sexy work. It's not something people like to spend money on. It doesn't provide an immediate sort of ROI around form fills we were talking about before and things that you feel like are good outputs of marketing. But increasingly, as more and more companies see the importance of intent signals, as more and more companies see, especially those with finite markets, that the goal is not to go generate more leads. If you know who you're selling to and you've already interacted with most of those people, you don't have to go generate them on Google again. You don't have to get them to fill out another form. But how well you understand who they are and what they're looking for makes a really big difference in not only how well you can engage them, but that investment in operations, that investment in data can create significant cost efficiencies in your marketing for years to come.
What are your thoughts of the frontier of virtual today with events and everything going on that is replacing in person? There's a lot of data in everything to do with events and virtual events. Yeah. How is that being handled today? Do you believe that that box of data is being well routed and used today?
No, it's not. And because, and what's in it, and it's a huge opportunity for companies going into 2021. We're going to be in a mostly virtual in event environment, for most of 2021. And the amount of data that you have coming out of events, because which breakout sessions they went to, how long they were watching it, what they mentioned in the chat and what keywords they were using, which other attendees they interacted with. All the stuff that is lost in the hallways of the conference center, you have that. And so your ability to not just customize follow-up, like customizing follow-up and next steps is one thing. What about customizing real-time experiences? What about recommending other sessions or other people to connect to or other benefits within the conference or within the event in real time based on the data you've already seen? So what we can observe and what we can track in virtual events, the sky's the limit. A lot of that is being captured already. There just isn't necessarily sort of a follow-up and engagement plan behind it.
Yeah, it's one of the things that now is coming to reality because it's accelerated, and it's not just about hybrid and how do we go back to in person. It's how are you leveraging the amazing set of data that you're getting from all these digital first places, which is a new trend, and leveraging it either in agile or post show. 2 weeks after the show, that's way too late. You gotta have it now.
Yep.
Okay, love it. One of the things that we've asked a lot about, thank you, Matt, for this conversation, is you have this amazing ability probably to talk to CEOs and founders, not like a CMO can. CMO is sometime in the role, CRO is in the role. Can't always tell to the founder or the CEO, listen, this is complete BS. We should never do this. This is the way it should happen. You're talking, okay. Maybe board members do that, and sometimes advisors, which I'm happy to be one as well, and people like yourself can. What is this thing that you would tell CEOs? What was something they never know and people are afraid to tell them? What are examples of that?
Yeah, I would say increasingly beware of vanity metrics in marketing, things that look shiny, that look nice, that make you feel good, but aren't generating impact. Increasingly, I think, over investing in media and under investing in revenue operations is a path to diminished impact of marketing efforts. And related to that, I would highly encourage CMOs to think of their marketing team not as a cost center, but as a revenue creator. The marketing team, should be measured not based on vanity metrics in the marketing of more. They should be measured on revenue impact. And I think by having that mandate across the organization, and by treating marketing as that revenue creator, I think you reinforce more of the behavior and decisions, both strategic decisions as well as day-to-day decisions, that create more value on a regular basis for the organization.
Love it. Marketing should be not just the lead generator and throwing it over the fence, but rather determine on revenue pipeline and the bottom of the funnel contribution versus just the top and throw it away.
Yep.
Like it a lot. Great, Matt. Any other things to tell us about, the future of data and how it relates to go to market? Any last vision words?
Yeah, just get comfortable with it. I think if you're a marketing leader, you're going to spend more and more time using data to create better conversations. I'd make sure you are figuring out in your organization for your business based on your go-to-market plan, how to create not a marketing operations program, but a revenue operations view across the customer-facing teams. Not always easy to do, not something you can necessarily do quickly, but it will be foundational for you for years to come.
You're thinking long-term, data is critical for everything about the company, marketing, go-to-market.